Welcome to Cloud Radio, made for full-stack cloud operators. Cloud Radio covers all aspects of the business of software. Excited to have Karim Fanous on the show today. I've first discovered him through Substack, where we're both writers, and he writes about engineering management on a blog called Cumulative.io, and we'll have that in the show notes. And I've, as a non-technical business person and investor, been reading for years now and just gotten a lot of insights out of it and wanted to invite him on the show. And as always, I'll let him give his background instead of me mangling it. So Karim, thank you. And want to tell everyone a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah. First off, Matt, thank you for inviting me on your show. I've also been a follower of yours for multiple years now. I enjoy your Substack and, obviously it's more business oriented, which is very, very helpful for me. A quick background about myself. I'm presently head of engineering at a cybersecurity company called StrongDM. I've been here for a little bit over 4 years. And my background is entirely in engineering management and software development. I've spent 25 years so far in software development across different roles, mostly over the last 10 plus years working at startups, joining early stage and then, trying to grow these businesses and make them large, successful companies.
Awesome. We'll try and structure this episode a bit on engineering management, VPE type titles, then AI, and then lastly, security. And one writing that stood out to me is you've described a VP of engineering's role as programming people plus product plus processes. Could you elaborate on that? And then what do buggy processes look like from afar, kind of at a board level or a CEO level, and how do you debug them?
Yeah, the job is you're ultimately responsible for delivering on the product that the business is going to sell, okay? And that product is going to get built by a combination of, there's people and tools and processes working in concert to get this finished product out into the market. So the job is orchestrating all of those three different protagonists. You're building teams, you're hiring, you might be not be hiring, you might be parting ways with people, like you're adjusting and building that team that is going to be able to become the vehicle that builds that product. And as you grow this organization, you might start with a handful of engineers and maybe you grow to 100, to 1,000. You're going to have to adapt and implement some processes. I know the word process is a little bit of synonymous with bureaucracy, but as you grow, you're going to have to change and adapt to how you're running this organization in response to scale. So the job is you're ultimately responsible for, I want to give a widget out, put a widget out the door that my sellers can go and sell. But behind the scenes, that's going to be built by a combination of people, tools, and processes. And you're just sort of like that orchestrator of those 3 or 4 different ingredients. If you're looking at it from afar, so you're at the board level, a buggy process, and I like that term, is almost going to get manifested itself into business metrics that are misaligned with where you want business to be. Early on in the life cycle of a company, that is almost going to be synonymous with growth. You want to be growing at X percentage and you're not growing that fast. So the board might question, do we have the right product? Are we making the right investments in the product? Is the product that I'm putting out there, is that the product that the market needs? Do I have a quality problem? Is also another thing that the board might ask. I might be putting the right product out, but the experience is subpar. It is buggy. It is not meeting customer expectation. And then the other part of that buggy process could be you're putting the right product out, but you've got a go-to-market problem. You're unable to take that product and put it in the hands of willing, enabled buyers. As you move closer to the go-to-market side, the engineering's role is somewhat diminished, but it's not zero. Meaning if you've got a go-to-market challenge, it still doesn't absolve me from raising my hand and say, I'm done. I gave you the good product and, adios. It's your problem. It's not. You're part of that puzzle. And the closer you are to the engineering side, whether it's a quality or you're unable to put the right product in the market, that's squarely, in the hands of the engineering function.
Interesting. And just taking that a different way, because at the board level, there's certain level of metrics you can look at, like kind of DORA style things about code commits or quality. or productivity measures, you might not fully understand them. In your experience, have measures and dashboards mapped well to actually buggy process or diagnosing things, or are they just kind of interesting to look at?
At the board level, I usually never surface these metrics to the board. A board doesn't really care about your DORA metrics. I mean, they might out of intellectual curiosity, but they really shouldn't. They really care about the outcomes, okay? And the outcomes are, is the business growing? Are you growing at a clip that we expect you to be, especially in a venture-backed business? They care about cost or leverage. As you grow, if I'm doubling headcount every year, but my business is not, I'm not gaining any leverage, well, that's a problem, because ultimately you want to be able to show to the board that you're able to build a profitable business. So in time, you want to be able to show that leverage, that I'm able to build more, but the cost is, or the ROI is increasing. So I think those are the metrics you want to focus on. The secondary metrics like DORA metrics, commits, lines of codes, whatever metrics you're using within engineering, they're going to help you understand where the problem is. So let's say I've got a problem with quality. Okay. And I go to the board and say, hey, we've got a big problem. The product is not a really good quality. We've got escalations left, right, and center, and we've got customer churn and whatnot. Okay, that's the problem. And I need to look at the underlying metrics to figure out, okay, where's the fire at? What do I fix quality wise? Where do I pour more resources to stem that problem? But I'm not going to go to the board and, show them, I don't know, past test failures and regression tests. You want to show them the business problem or the business metric that they care about. And internally, if they ask you, like, how are you going to solve it? You are absolutely need to be prepared to show DORA metrics and things like that if you have to.
That's good to know. I think there's an element of intellectual curiosity that might spark some of those, but it's good to hear the ground level truth there.
Sometimes board members will test you to see if you know your stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and they want you to be audible ready. Okay. Much like you might be a CRO and ask about your pipeline. Okay. And if you don't know the answer to that, well, okay, that's a bit of a problem.
For sure. And that's a good transition point for non-technical founder, CEO, CFO. What are some good but non-obvious executive interview questions to vet a VP of engineering, a CTO, and perhaps that show that you're not just someone who can talk the talk, but you can walk the walk?
That's the answer, actually. That's the gist of it. I think the questions I like the most are, you're leading a function, but that function exists within a business context. Okay. We're here to build a company, a profitable company. And you want to be able to vet that engineering leader to see if they're able to connect these dots. It's one thing to say, evaluate them on their technical competency and their ability to lead an engineering organization, which is absolutely important to do. But I think from the CEO's or the board vantage, you also want to get someone who is able to connect these dots and able to see how that function fits in the overarching business. So the questions I like being asked in that sort of interview they're primarily business related questions that are connected to engineering reality. Okay. Because that, I think, is going to help the CEO, the CFO interviewing that person make a judgment on, I want to get someone who is pretty competent in running that function, but also helps me in running the business. Okay. I'll give you some examples of, business related questions that have and responses that are grounded in engineering. Launching a new product. Okay. How do you think of that problem? That is squarely an engineering and product problem, but touches all parts of the organization of the business. How do you solve that particular problem? What data do you need, or how do you go about solving that particular problem? Maybe we're in a particular vertical today and we're going to launch a new product in an adjacent market. What do you do? How do you address this particular one? Dealing with a disgruntled customer or helping sales win a particular deal. How do you reason about all of these things? And you'll end up finding that, if I'm answering these questions, there's going to be some element of my answer that's going to be engineering specific, but it still is a business problem. It's not, my commit's going to go from X to Y. I'm going to hire 5 engineers and we're going to build stuff. Okay, that's cute, but what is the big problem we're trying to solve? That's
great. And kind of after the interview, let's talk about the CEO VPE relationship. And what is one thing a SaaS CEO thinks they understand about engineering but ultimately causes friction or wasted resources?
This is a lesson I learned early on in my career. Pretty much, maybe not so much nowadays. Every time I'm hired, usually in that position, at the point where the company has sufficient confidence that we have product market fit. You have a small team, maybe it's a handful, and you've built the kernel of the product and you've tested it, you take it out to market, and you've got strong signal that there's a there, we want to scale the business. We want to hire a CRO, we want to hire more reps, and we want to hire a lot more engineers. The fallacy or the illusion is I've got 10 engineers today. We build 10 widgets in a year. Karim, go and hire 20. We're going to build 20 in a year. The answer is no. You're going to build 10. The analogy I give them is you're going to double the engineering capacity and your productivity is actually, if you're lucky, remain as is. The reason is it takes time and energy and effort to find people, to train them, to onboard them, to get them to be productive. And that takes that capacity that you're assuming is going to deliver product into something else. And that's one of the big frictions early on that I had with CEOs who were like, hey, you've doubled the team and we're still operating at the same, speed or throughput or velocity as 6 months ago. Well, yes, just like, your CRO is going to tell you, I hire a rep today, they're going to be fully productive in, 9 months, 6 months, whatever your rep looks like. It's the same thing that happens in engineering. And that's one thing that can result in some friction because from a board level or from a CEO level, they're looking at the spend go up, the headcount go up, but I'm not seeing anything yet. The output is flat. How do I move that, bend that curve? And that takes a little bit of time.
And how do you manage that? Do you really emphasize that, preview it? Like, how do you kind of de-escalate any friction there?
I explain it. Now, I don't have this isn't science. Like, it's not like, it's going to take 9 months or 6 months or a year. It's not particularly scientific, but you explain what's about to happen to the organization. You want me to go double the team? Great. Well, that's going to take some capacity from the existing team. Guess what? They're going to be interviewing. They're going to be onboarding them. The new person doesn't know the new code base. It's going to take some time for them to gel. And when you parlay that story and maybe you connect to something that they're more familiar with, the sales analogy is a really good analogy, where if you look at any sales model, there's a rep. I hire a rep today, they're fully productive, or they get to full quota, 9 months, 12 months, depending on your rep. Same sort of thing. The challenge with engineering is, which is ironic because of the name engineering, is we don't have hard data to show you what that ramp looks like. So it is a little bit of storytelling and also making sure that's on me. I'm able to show the results as quickly as possible, but also buy myself and the team time for us to be able to find those right people, hire them, onboard them, and become more productive. Because the very last thing I would want to do to the business is just go out and hire people that have a bad fit for the sake of just doubling the team and saying mission accomplished. So you want to be able to be responsible and be upfront and transparent that, hey, this isn't a linear curve. This is going to take some time, but you benefit once we're on the other side of it.
That's great. And then just at a higher level, what's some general advice you would give first-time VP engineering or someone who's looking at that role, aspiring to that role?
Yeah, that's a very good question. If I look back at my career or my first time in that role, one of my biggest learnings was I just assumed that this role was, individual contributor plus. It's not. It's a completely different role. You have to forget and shed all the skills and all the strengths that you developed as an individual contributor and move to it's a different position. It's like you moving from a player on a sports team and becoming the coach. Okay. And that takes a little bit of a mindset change because inevitably your core strength has been I was a very competent engineer, and that's why I've been rewarded to become the head of engineering. So I have to be involved in everything in engineering. So you have to be able to figure out that you're now operating at a different elevation, and the problems you're trying to solve aren't strictly engineering problems. Yes, they are. And yes, you have to be involved in understanding the day-to-day operations in your team, but you're no longer a software engineer. Okay. If you're going to take that role, assuming that you are going to be, the best and most prolific software engineer on the team, you're going to fail. So that takes a little bit of reflection, a little bit of trying to work with your peers and your leadership team on what are the problems that you want to be, that the business needs to solve. And then that becomes your job. Okay. As opposed to hands on keyboard typing code or working with Claude to type code. I'm going to be doing 100 times of that. The job changes. It's a very different job.
That's fascinating and great advice. And I think now we'll go into AI themes, which is obviously the topic of the day. One of your recent posts was titled, "AI made us faster. That's not the same as better." And then there was one particular quote within I liked. "AI now meaningfully accelerates parts of the job, but it doesn't absolve us of ownership. Used deliberately, it makes good engineers more effective. Used carelessly, it amplifies debt." And one question I had in there is kind of at an engineering leadership level, how do you stay close enough to the code, to the processes, so you get what you inspect in a very, very high volume environment where debt can amplify?
Amazing question. And the reason I'm laughing is the answer changes by the week. When I first wrote that piece, I think it was August, the world was very different than what it was today. So I'll give you two answers. Back then, AI models were, especially as coding tools like Claude Code, were pretty amazing, and they still are. But I don't think it hit me until earlier this year that the human in a loop, which is how we were using these tools. Like I'd use Claude, I write a bit of code, I'd look at the code and go like, write some more, I'd look at the code and write some more. So there's always been that human in the loop. Like we'd inspect and see like, hey, what did this black box do? And is that code correct? Is it code that I trust? And if it is, then I'm going to push it out. So you always had AI building something, human looks at it, at least this is the way we were using it, and push it out the door. Now we're very quickly reaching the point where that is no longer going to be how software is built in the very near future. And there are parts of the software world that are operating this way, where basically you've got the AI is building it lock, stock, and barrel with no human looking at it. And that's a very, very different problem than a human inspecting it. So you're going to have to solve that with software and models somehow. Eventually meaning the entire loop from ideation to creation to verification is done with hands-free, with no human in the loop. How? And I don't exactly know, to be honest, but I know that this is how software will be developed fairly, fairly soon. Anthropic just released their latest model, 4.6, I think it was last week. And in doing so, they also published a post about building a compiler, which is a fairly sophisticated piece of software entirely autonomously with a bunch of Claude codes at a total cost of $20,000. This is a fairly complex piece of software that was written with no human intervention, zero human in the loop. So that's just the beginning. And I think this is going to accelerate. And as an industry, we're going to have to answer this question that you asked me. And the answer can't be that a human is going to look at the code, because the volume of code that these agents are going to write is going to far surpass my ability to comprehend it or my ability to reason about it. And that's one. Secondarily is if you're doing it this way, so you've got, moving at the speed of GPUs, but throttled by the speed of human. I mean, the human has to review it. So you're ultimately moving at the speed of human. You want to be moving at the speed of GPUs.
And just kind of real time and taking a grandparently perspective, right? Or you just hear this and don't know a lot of the reality, but you just zoom far out. You might respond like, what in the world are you doing with that much code that no one is looking at? I guess, like, is that advisable?
It is if you're able to verify it systematically. If you're going to be verifying it by a human looking at it, then you're still going to be moving at the speed of human. Okay? Which is fine. I mean, this is how software has been developed since the birth of the industry. But I think we're at this inflection point now where we're all coming to the realization that This is no longer going to be the case. And therefore, we're going to have to solve that problem. Like, we can't just toss it over the wall and say, it's too much. I can't comprehend it. No one's able to comprehend it. So, out it goes. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, we'll take that slot back. We're going to have to solve it with engineering, okay? And new tools and a new software development lifecycle. And, we're sort of like living it now and trying to figure out how to answer these questions. But I can tell you definitively, or it's too strong a word, that it cannot be a human looking at it. What? I don't know yet. And I think as an industry, we're in the middle of trying to figure out what that looks like, what that future looks like.
That's an excellent answer. And there are trade-offs. And I think, reading between the lines or reading explicitly, it's the speed and the volume that matters, that, some of these human-centered, QA-centered processes might leave you in kind of the equivalent of 1995. And we're entering into 2040, right? And it's speed, it's volume, and, your human concerns, human review, and that these models have gotten so good so fast that this concern might be foolish.
It's a valid concern, absolutely. I don't think it will be solved by a human in the loop. I think it will be solved, obviously, by human ingenuity, but ultimately it's machines that are going to be responsible for, building it and verifying it, the full cycle.
Fascinating. This is fascinating. And
it is.
I think, that transitions well into some of your more recent writing and preparing for a world where humans don't write code is the article, and we'll have this in the show notes. Really good, strong piece. And I like this analogy. The programmer's craft will follow the same arc as animation. In place of writing every line, much of the work will involve guiding and integrating what machines produce, defining the architecture, reviewing generated components, making judgments on trade-offs and user experience, and ensuring the final system works as intended. At the engineering management level, what does that mean? Like, what skills change? What gets more important? What are some elaborations there?
Also a very good question. And one that is difficult to answer. I think the job definitely evolves and changes and morphs into more than one job. And I think this answer might apply to anyone who is in the product development machine, whether you're strictly in product management, you might be in design, or it might be in engineering management. I think in a world of AI, building, those three roles get mushed into one. Okay, where you can no longer say, I think you're strictly in the engineering domain and you are not going to be as close as possible to your customers in the market, or have at least some ability to design software like pixels. Because the tools you have at your disposal today allow you to do all of that. Okay? You and I can come up with a prototype, soup to nuts, with beautiful functional software and put it out to market, at least to test a hypothesis in hours, if not minutes. It depends on obviously the scope of what we're doing. So the cycle time is shrinking from ideation to putting something out to market and testing a hypothesis. So I think the job then becomes how we run as many experiments as possible to validate or invalidate hypotheses very, very rapidly. And that's a combination of engineering, product, and design. Because what you're trying to do is, I've got this amazing machine that can build anything. Okay, and it can build it very, very quickly, and the cost per token is plummeting as well. So it can build it very cheaply. How do I take advantage of that? And that's going to be a function of trying to figure out what is the right problem to solve with the right solution. I think that's the role. The role changes from strictly managing a team of software developers and making sure that the product out the door is correct and on time and whatnot, to orchestrating experiments. Again, you're asking questions that are very difficult to answer in today. In present, there's an amazing question. It's just hard to
I know that feel. I come on podcasts and you get, what is that? And it's just like someone could talk for 82 hours and would barely scratch the surface. And there's no way I can know that. And to tie it a little to your question though, and it's, we're building some things internally, technically at Cloud Ratings, which has been fascinating. And then just in the course of this episode, right, I'm hearing about volume, these amazing tools, and in that last answer, all of the experimentation. And it's a bit counterintuitive because you see all of the, the trend lines around headcount and everything should get more efficient. But when you think about how amazing these resources are and like the sheer insane volume of opportunities it creates for those experiments and the payoffs to those experiments, you might think like, hey, instead of having one VP of engineering, I should have 5. And I should have 5 product managers instead of 1. And we should just be going insane. And I've been considering that for us, right? Where we should actually radically expand the human side to even tap into the insane potential of AI. Am I crazy?
And you're not. So long as, it goes, but the missing link is still, like, if you're going to be operating at the speed of human, then yes, you need to hire more humans. But if it's fully autonomous, if we truly believe that at some point this is going to be pretty much autonomous, then there's other problems that we need to solve because we're not ready for that yet as an industry. But your intuition is 100% correct. I can run far more experiments and build a lot more today than I could ever build in the history of mankind or humankind, right? So therefore, your intuition is correct. So, I'll build everything, which I think is also why you start seeing the overreaction in markets of this is the end of software, because you and I can build any piece of software now, right? We can just build Snowflake and Databricks while we're on this podcast.
That's good to hear. And again, apologies for the impossible questions.
You did great questions, Matt.
you're in the hot seat, and we'll transition to a cuter question, right? Because the 10x engineer, right?
Yeah.
And as we move into this era, does the floor get raised for the mediocre engineer, or does the ceiling dramatically go up such that the 10x engineer becomes 1,000x?
I think both happen. Okay. And I think, at least in my thinking, both happen. And the analogy I use is, I think of like a carpenter. Okay. And you're not using power tools have not been invented yet. Okay. And you're really good at your craft. And I come along and hand you power tools. Okay. And I give you, Matt, the expert carpenter power tools, and I give a novice carpenter power tools. Who do you think is going to be the better carpenter? It's still you. Okay. I think the same applies with, a prolific software engineer plus AI is, 100x better than a prolific engineer without AI, and 100 times better than a normal engineer with AI, I think. The reason is experience, taste. You've seen a breadth of problems. You're able to articulate and constrain how the domain the AI has to operate in. And these things come from, mileage. Like you've seen many, many, many problems, and you're able to work with an immensely powerful tool like AI to guide it which is still an important thing to do, to guide it to deliver, the correct product that you want. So I don't think we all become prolific engineers just because we're able to prompt tools like Claude and Codex. I still think that experience, that intuition, that taste is going to be immensely important in a world where pretty much anyone can build software.
That's I think an excellent answer, and we'll move away from AI, but AI is ever present into security. And at the high level, what is the biggest security risk, security weakness, or what are people missing kind of on the non-technical side, investor side, in terms of this rush to incorporate AI into everything or involving AI in so many functions? What are some security risks that are non-obvious, and how concerned should people be, kind of like 1 to 10? How freaked out or not about security and AI should we be?
I don't think we should be freaked out, but I think we should be concerned. And I think we are. The risks, there's a multitude of them. The obvious one is these systems are non-deterministic. The canonical software that you and I are used to, you and I can read the code and figure out like, okay, this is the domain or the constraints in which this piece of software is going to operate in. If I give you a database, it will not go and, update HR records. It's just going to store data and that's the end of it. Okay. And, give you the ability to retrieve data. So you've got like this box that the software operates in. With AI or with, you've got now an LLM embedded in a piece of software, it is non-deterministic. Okay. It can perform actions that you and I looking at that code cannot envision. Okay. It can go and update that HR record. So it can perform these non-deterministic actions, which our tooling and security or in the software development lifecycle is not equipped to detect, let alone react to. So we are now all of a sudden have to deal with a non-deterministic piece of software embedded in our workflow, embedded in the enterprise. Okay, and you might have heard in the news of someone playing with an AI agent and it deleted the production database. Okay, that's going to happen. Okay, where we have these agents and all of a sudden they perform an action that was not intended and, well, it caused some catastrophic failure. I think we're going to see more and more of that as AI adoption increases. The other thing that is also not going to work is it goes back to it's the same problem that we talked about with a human in a loop in software engineering. If I bring in your enterprise an autonomous agent that is able to perform some job function, okay, and I'm going to shackle it by every time it's going to do something, I'm going to ask a human, well, that becomes, again, your GPU at the speed of human. So you're moving at the speed of human. You're missing the point entirely by getting these autonomous agents. So if you're bringing truly autonomous agents in your enterprise, which is going to happen, then you need to solve the security problem without a human in the loop. You still need a human in the loop for sure, but not for every action. You're going to have to solve it with a different security toolkit, not one that we have today, because the toolkits that we have today are things like policies and RBACs and ABACs. Matt is allowed to do A, B, and C, but not D. It's very difficult to articulate what an agent should be able to do with the same primitives that we've applied to humans. So that toolkit is thrown out of the window and is going to have to be replaced with something else, something that we as an industry are, thinking of, trying to build and to innovate in. But I think, to your point, the security approach that we have today is going to change in response to having these autonomous agents running within the enterprise and accessing all sorts of different systems in the enterprise. And these are very, very important critical systems. Databases, systems of records, HR systems, financial systems, on and on.
And to get a little bit more specific, because for folks like me, a lot of AI and the security component is still very theoretical, right? We understand volume, non-deterministic, kind of unsupervised, but seeing the solutions to a generalized thing might be hard. And some of your writing has been quite helpful there. And one of the themes or solutions was around kind of employee rebranding. You've argued that we need to stop treating bots like scripts and start treating them like employees. Is that part of that framework you're discussing?
Yeah, my co-founder and CTO here at StrongDM uses an analogy where you have to treat AI as a coworker. So just by way of context, we actually have some pockets of our team here using, like, we've got canonical traditional software engineering, people type on a keyboard and commit code, and we also have autonomous. So we have both, because we're trying to learn and slowly adapt and understand what that world looks like. So we've got agents that are committing and writing code. And if you treat that agent as a bot, that's one thing. If you start treating it as a coworker, you're going to build different intuition, different tools, and different ways of interacting with that AI than you would with a Slack bot. It's no longer a Slack bot. It's a thing. It's not a living thing, but it's the thing that you interact with. If it makes a mistake, like if you and I are working on a team together and I make a mistake, you're going to interact with me. Maybe you're going to text me. Maybe you're going to email me. You're going to pick up the phone and call me. So even the way we communicate with these agents is very, quote unquote, human centric. We can communicate with these agents in all of these modalities. So I think that analogy is correct and is one that has been very helpful in our internal understanding and using of AI agents, at least in software and building software. I think when it comes to security, you also want to deal with that with some nuance, and the nuance is with a human, I can still constrain what it does. This is sort of like a superhuman being that can do things that we didn't imagine that they would do because they're non-deterministic. Whereas with humans, I can you're in finance, you should only touch your ERP system and that's it. But for these other agents, they might perform actions that we did not imagine them to do.
And then just because you guys have been doing it as StrongDM and kind of treating the bots like employee, like what are some learning, like do you actually give them names?
We do.
Like add them to the Slack? Like what are some, like for someone who's never tried this, like what does it mean to kind of make them a teammate or an employee?
Absolutely. They have names. They're on Slack. I can Slack them. I can text them. I can have them on Zoom. I can email them. They can email me back. So they have this identity, which is a loaded term because I work in an identity security, but they do have this identity and this persona. I can check in and see what they're doing. I can give them feedback. I can see all the actions and trails that they're doing to try and understand how they're thinking. And I can communicate with them just like I can communicate with you. I can talk to them. I can pick up the phone and call Jen, which is one of our agents. I can email her, I guess, or it or they, I don't know. But it's like a core.
Are some of these rituals for you or for the agent?
For both.
Because that's what I'm thinking is like, just for me, if I were to, all of a sudden StrongDM made the mistake of hiring me and I've got these agents, or we considered implementing them here at Cloud Ratings, I think some of this would be for me, right? Just to kind of feel like maybe I develop some level of trust, or that there's a bit of magical thinking that my feedback like helps, and that's a question, right? Does any of this feedback or anything like,
absolutely it does. So the feedback, it does help. The feedback is, if you think of, have you used Claude Coworker or Claude Code at all?
Just a bit.
So one of the superpowers that these agents have is they're able to use tools. Just like primitive human beings started to use tools and they became, got a lot more advanced. These agents are able to use tools, simple tools, but they can use them much quicker than you and I can, and they're able to compound their usage of those tools. But sometimes they'll pick the wrong tool, okay? And the feedback we give them is, ironically, this feedback can also happen from a human as well as another agent that is looking at what the agent is doing. Is like, actually, next time, don't use this tool, use this other tool. And we'll incorporate that into the learnings of the agent. So the next time they perform a task that's similar to the task that we just gave them, they will not use that. They will use a different tool or adapt. Okay, so we're trying to guide these agents to be able to pick the right tool and perform the right set of actions, and to correct their mistakes if they're doing something similar in the future. We've open sourced quite a bit of that actually. Last week, we call it the StrongDM software factory. We've contributed a lot of that out into the world.
Fascinating. And where can people find that?
I'll post it for you.
Yeah, we'll add it to the show notes. That's fascinating. I think a lot of people would be inspired by this, and just to see what you are doing. It all sounds very impressive and worth exploring. So again, we'll put that in the show notes. Look, we've had some phenomenal answers from you, and I can imagine everyone's going to want to stay current with your blog and this type of insight. It's honestly has been amazing. And where can people find you, and anything else you want to promote or share about yourself?
I write. I've got, we connected on Substack. I write semi-irregularly, so anytime I've got something that's, I'm thinking about, I'll push it out there, mostly for my own education. So my Substack is Cumulative with 2 M's, actually, .io. And you can find me there. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm a lurker on Twitter or X. I don't contribute much there, but I like consuming content there. But I think between my blog, LinkedIn is where you can find me. And if you want to reach me out through my blog as well, email or whatnot, happy to connect one-on-one as well.
Awesome. Well, look, this has been awesome. Really appreciate you making the time and the phenomenal answers.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun, and your timing was impeccable with this AI. It really, truly is an incredible time to be alive.